When you board a commercial airplane, it's hard not to notice the safety demonstration that every flight begins with. The flight attendants show you how to buckle your seatbelt, where the life jackets are stored, and how to use the oxygen masks that will drop down in case of an emergency. But there's one thing they never mention: a parachute. It's a question that might cross your mind, especially if you're a nervous flyer. Why don't passengers on commercial planes get parachutes? Wouldn't it be comforting to know you could just jump out if something went wrong? Well, as it turns out, there are some very good reasons why parachutes aren't part of your in-flight experience, and understanding them might actually make you feel a bit better about flying. Let's start with the basics. Parachuting isn't as easy as it looks. Hollywood loves to show dramatic scenes where the hero, often played by someone like Tom Cruise, grabs a parachute, jumps out of a plane, and gracefully floats to the ground. In reality, parachuting is a skill that takes serious training. You can't just throw on a parachute and hope for the best. Jumping out of a plane, deploying your chute at the right time, directing yourself safely away from obstacles, and landing without injury requires practice and experience. Most people wouldn't know where to start, and trying to figure it out during an emergency situation would be a recipe for disaster. Imagine trying to put on a parachute while the plane is shaking, alarms are blaring, and everyone around you is in a panic. It's not exactly the best time to try and learn a new skill. But let's say, for argument's sake, that every passenger on the plane has somehow become a trained skydiver. Even then, there's the small matter of actually getting out of the airplane. Commercial planes are pressurized to keep passengers comfortable while flying at high altitudes, typically around 35,000 feet. At that height, the air outside is too thin to breathe, and temperatures can drop to a bone-chilling -60 degrees Fahrenheit, -51 degrees Celsius. The cabin is sealed tightly to maintain a breathable atmosphere, so opening a door mid-flight is not just impossible, it's extremely dangerous. If someone did manage to open a door, the sudden loss of pressure could cause the cabin to decompress rapidly, which could have terrible consequences for everyone on board. And even if you could open the door safely, there's still the issue of the plane's speed. Commercial aircraft typically cruise at speeds of around 500 to 600 miles per hour. At that speed, jumping out of the plane would be like trying to step out of a car speeding down the highway, times 10. The force of the wind would hit you like a bullet train, and you'd likely be knocked unconscious before you had a chance to deploy your parachute. Even professional skydivers don't jump from planes going anywhere near that fast. But let's imagine, just for a second, that you've managed to open the door and jump out without losing consciousness. Now you're free falling, and it's not exactly the peaceful drop you might have hoped for. Those huge jet engines attached to the sides of the plane are sucking in massive amounts of air, and anything else that gets too close. If you're unlucky enough to be pulled toward one of those engines, you could be turned into a human meat patty before you even realize what's happening. It's not a pleasant thought, but it's a very real danger that would make parachuting from a commercial plane extremely risky. And then there's the matter of altitude. As mentioned earlier, commercial planes fly at around 35,000 feet, where the air is not only freezing cold, but also extremely thin. Without supplemental oxygen, you wouldn't last long at that altitude. The human body simply isn't designed to function in such an environment. If you jumped out of the plane without an oxygen supply, you'd likely pass out within seconds. In some cases, the rapid change in pressure could even cause your lungs to explode, especially if you tried to hold your breath, a natural reaction to fear. The lack of oxygen, combined with the freezing temperatures, would make it nearly impossible to survive long enough to deploy your parachute and reach a safe altitude. Now, suppose you somehow manage to avoid all these dangers and make it out of the plane alive. You still have to fight with the chaos inside the cabin. In an emergency, passengers would likely panic, leading to a mad rush to grab parachutes. Picture the scene. Hundreds of people, all trying to put on parachutes at the same time, while the plane is in distress. Parents would be desperately trying to strap parachutes onto their children. People would be fighting over who gets to jump first. And in the middle of all this, time would be running out. Plane crashes often happen suddenly, leaving only minutes or even seconds to react. In such a situation, the chances of everyone calmly and successfully parachuting out of the plane are close to zero. Even if we put aside all the physical and practical challenges, there's still the issue of cost. Parachutes are expensive, especially the kind that would be needed for high-altitude jumps. Each passenger would need a high-quality parachute, along with an oxygen tank and a protective suit to survive the cold temperatures at cruising altitude. The cost of providing this equipment for every passenger would be pocket-damaging. Plane tickets, which are already costly for many travelers, would become extremely expensive. Imagine having to pay for not just a seat, but also a personal parachute, oxygen supply, and survival gear. Suddenly, that budget vacation to Hawaii doesn't seem so affordable. But the costs don't stop there. Airlines would also need to provide thorough training to make sure that passengers knew how to use their parachutes properly. This would involve hours of instruction, practice jumps, and possibly even compulsory skydiving certifications. All of this would add to the time and expense of air travel, making it less accessible for the average person. And let's not forget the legal implications. If something went wrong during a parachute evacuation, say a parachute failed to open or someone was injured while trying to jump, the airline would be facing a lot of lawsuits. The legal liabilities alone would be enough to discourage any airline from considering parachutes as a safety measure. There's also the simple fact that parachutes wouldn't be effective in many of the situations where they might seem useful. Most plane crashes happen during takeoff or landing, not at cruising altitude. In these scenarios, there wouldn't be enough time to distribute parachutes, get everyone suited up, and jump. The best safety measures in these cases are the ones already in place: seatbelts, life jackets, and the skill of the pilots and crew. Modern airplanes are designed with numerous safety features, and pilots are trained to handle emergencies. The chances of a commercial plane encountering a situation where parachutes would be useful are incredibly slim. So, while the idea of having a parachute on a plane might sound comforting at first, the reality is that it would create more problems than it would solve. Between the need for training, the physical dangers of high-altitude jumps, the risk of being sucked into a jet engine, and the pure chaos that would develop, it's clear that parachutes are not a practical safety solution for commercial air travel. Add to that the outrageous costs and legal liabilities, and it's easy to see why airlines have never seriously considered offering parachutes to passengers. In the end, the best way to stay safe while flying is to trust the systems already in place. Modern airplanes are wonders of engineering, designed to keep you safe from the moment you buckle your seatbelt to the moment you touch down. Air travel is statistically the safest way to get from point A to point B, far safer than driving, and definitely safer than trying to skydive your way out of trouble. The pilots and crew are highly trained professionals who know what they're doing, and they've got your back. So, next time you board a plane, just remember, you're in good hands. There's no need for a parachute or a Hollywood-style escape plan. Instead, grab a snack, watch a movie, and let the experts handle the flying. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Tom Cruise can keep the parachutes.